Okay.
Yes. Why don't we have you guys introduce yourselves and then we'll introduce ourselves. Yeah, where you're going and your name.
All right, my name is Etienne Batiste. I'm going to London with Arcadia University. I'm a junior.
Where are you going? I'm Kim Womack, a sophomore computer science major going to Queen Mary University of London. I'm Cameron Boyd, a sophomore computer science major, and I'm also going to Queen Mary University.
All right, hi, other Cameron.
Hi, my name is Summer Ellis. I'm going to Florence, Italy with Syracuse University.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alexis Peterson, and I'm going to Copenhagen, Denmark, and Rome, Italy with CIEE Open Campus.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Boyla. I'm a sophomore Spanish major. I'm going to Alicante, Spain with CIEE.
Hi, my name is Alexis. I'm a sophomore Spanish major going to Alicante with CIEE.
Hi, I'm Isabel St. Jean. I'm an international studies major, sophomore, and I'm going to Toulouse, France with CIEE.
Hi, my name is Kezia Okech. I'm going to University of Mary in London.
Hello, my name is Shelby. I'm a second year economics major. I'm going to Stockholm, Sweden with CIS.
Hi, I'm Zari. I'm a sophomore computer science major. I'm going to Queen Mary University of London with Arcadia.
Hi, my name is Lauren Span. I'm a sophomore economics major. I'm going to Cambridge, England with the STS program.
I'm Jada Wright, sophomore political science major. I'm going to London with INSTEP.
Hi, my name is Treasure Tanik. I'm a sophomore psychology and theater major, and I'm going to Denmark, Copenhagen with DIS. That's everyone.
Do we just have one more person walk in?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is you.
Oh, right here.
Hi, my name is Kenichi Obasi. I'm a sophomore international studies major on a pre-med track, and I'm going to Stockholm in the fall.
Okay, great. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. We're going to give you a quick intro of ourselves, and then we have a PowerPoint that we think will give you something else to look at besides us. So my name is Shanae Brown. I work at Arcadia University as a program manager, and I currently advise on our programs going to Ireland and New Zealand. I've also spent some time overseas, mostly in Asia, some parts of the Caribbean, and a few other parts of the world.
And I'm Drew Valermi Lightfoot, and I work with our programs going to England and Wales. So I've worked with many of you already. You should know my name at least. So it's a pleasure to meet you guys virtually.
Yeah. And just to let you know, so we're going to mute your mic while we do some of the presentation, just so that we're not picking up every little, small noise that happens. The mics can be a little sensitive. We're going to stop every few minutes and ask if anyone has questions. We also, within Blue Jeans, I know that your laptop is sort of in the center of the table, but if there's anything that anyone, there is a chat function on here through Blue Jeans. So if there's anything that anyone wants to type through or anything like that, you're welcome to do that. And we'll get started. So just give us 1 second while we mute. Does anyone have any questions before we get started? No. Okay, we're going to mute your mic really quick. We'll still be able to see you, just can't hear you. And we are about to begin sharing our presentation. Okay, can you see what we have on the screen, the presentation? Yes, okay, great.
Awesome. All right, so we've kind of already gone over this, so good to see a really wide variety of destinations that you guys are going to. So in general, our presentation is broad. The scope is pretty broad. We'll try to, I think we may have had some destinations on here that some of you are not going to, but we'll probably skip over those sections since it's not relevant for you guys.
Yeah, and if you, if you know any others that are studying abroad that maybe couldn't make it today, if they want to get in touch with us to sort of go over these things again, then that's fine. But yeah, looks like we mostly have Europe, which is fine. So, yep, and we're gonna get started.
Okay, so I'm going to start our presentation with a little country quiz. So on the left are some of the countries that you guys mentioned that you're going to, but I included the United States and New Zealand on here. The first question, just to test your general knowledge about these places, which one do you think is the most linguistically diverse country out of this list? This means basically the most number of languages spoken, the likelihood that two people who are randomly selected from this country don't speak the same language. So hold on to your answers. I am going to come back to this for the next slide. The second question is, which country uses the least electricity from fossil fuels? So their power grid is powered by solar, hydroelectric, or wind power. And then the last question, which outlet type is used in the country that you're going to? Do you know what it looks like? I listed 4 of them here. Okay, if you're ready, we'll bring up the answers.
Does anyone want to guess before we show you the answers? Does anyone have a guess for what the most linguistically diverse country is? Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, you're muted.
You're absolutely
Hold
right.
on a second.
What was that? Okay.
You can just do that.
It's not on
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have you unmuted now.
All right, sorry about that.
So we couldn't actually hear what you were saying. Sorry about that. You should have guessed it.
Any guesses for the first one, linguistically diverse?
What did we say? Okay.
The UK.
UK? That's a good guess.
Okay, and what about for the second question?
Sweden.
Sweden, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, and then
those last one's kind of personal, so I'm not going to have you guys answer that one. So the most linguistically diverse country is actually Spain. And, I was surprised by that too. The UK was, actually the US was a close second. The UK was also up there as well. In fact, a lot of more countries are much more linguistically diverse than the countries that you guys are going to. But actually Spain was really surprising. And then you guys guessed it right. Sweden was the country with the least electricity from fossil fuels. They have like 6% of the electricity in Sweden comes from fossil fuels, which is a leader in the world, one of the most green countries in the world. And then the plugs on the bottom, you should probably recognize the US one, hopefully. But your EU countries, so France, Italy, Spain use the EU standard one. The UK has a different one, and then Australia and New Zealand use the one on the right.
And then next, so again, this list is not the complete. Most of you are going to only get a few of these countries that are on here, but this is sort of the list that we were given to sort of work with. And so we'll be covering most of these countries in our presentation. If you have any questions about anything that we discuss, this is a very, as Drew mentioned, it's going to be a very broad overview just due to timing. So we're not going to touch on every single thing about these locations. But if you want to know more, you're welcome to ask us. If you're going, for those of you who are going with other programs, you're welcome to ask who you've been working with on those programs. There's a lot of information for most of these countries.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the UK. This is just some things we tell our students before they go abroad to the UK, little like cultural differences or things they have to just be aware of that might be a little different than being a student in the US. So first of all, you guys are going to London. One of you is going to Oxford or Cambridge. I can't remember which one you mentioned, but London is very much different than the rest of England. I mean, it's a big city. It's like studying abroad in New York City, right? Versus going to like Nebraska or someplace that's more rural and quiet. You know, London is a big, busy city, and your experience is going to be very different from someone who studied abroad at York or in Wales, or someplace more rural, more, more that English countryside feel. So that's definitely something that, you're going into. Secondly, commute. A lot of students are surprised by how long it takes to get from one side of the city to the other. London's just so big that, the tube is really convenient to use, but it could take like 2 or 3 hours to get across town. It's just, it's a big sprawling place. So that's a surprise that some students face when they go there. Diversity. London is an incredibly diverse city. There, really there's every language in the world spoken in London, or like there's so many languages spoken there. You're going to get a lot of that. It's a very international place. It's the center of global business in a lot of ways, arguably. And so you'll just see see a lot of different cultures. Then weather. People don't realize how chilly it could be in London, even in the summer or towards the beginning of your fall semester. It's similar. Actually, they said that London is most similar to Seattle in its weather conditions. It's rainy, it's a little chilly, it's windy. Summers don't get much hotter than like 80 degrees, 85. It never gets up to like as hot as it does in Atlanta for sure. So bring layers with you. And then in the winter it's cold, but it doesn't really snow a whole lot, but you might get like a little, like a dusting of snow kind of at the most. Our London staff are really funny because they didn't have any shovels to take care of. They recently had a snowstorm like a couple months ago where they got maybe an inch or two of snow, and they were really caught by surprise because it doesn't happen that often. So they were like using a broom to sweep away the snow on the sidewalk. And from being from Philadelphia, it's hilarious because we get a lot of snow here, and that's not that unusual. But yeah, the weather it's pretty mild, but chillier than you might expect it to be even in the summer. It's pretty common that buildings do not have air conditioning, at least residences. Most of your dorms, if you're in London or the area around it most likely won't have air conditioning. They just don't really need it typically. And then alcohol is the last one. So, it's not something that necessarily you have to partake in, but know that it's more common that people go out for a beer at the pub. A lot of dorms at some of the very prestigious UK universities will even have a bar in the dorm, which is crazy. It's so unheard of in America, but this is part of, that's kind of life for a lot of people. As I said, not necessarily something that you have to feel pressured into or be a part of, but the drinking age is lower and it's much more common. You'll see it. It's just a bonding thing for people. Yeah. There you go.
So next, I'll be doing a brief overview of Greece, France, Italy, and Spain. So obviously these 3 countries all have very distinct cultures, but there are some slight similarities. You'll find that within these 3 countries, a lot of focus on eating meals together. All of these countries are very prideful of their cuisine. It's not uncommon to have large meals with others. It's not uncommon to also take a long time, but maybe a little bit longer than like lunch break, or to spend more time just eating, dining, and talking together. There are also, for the most part, stores will probably be closed on Sunday. So for those of you that may be more used to getting your shopping and your errands done on Sunday, you might want to move that to another day because more than likely stores will be closed, and that's so that the shopkeepers and the people who own the stores can spend time with their own families and do whatever they have to do. Smoking is very common in most of these countries. And find that there are some bars or some establishments that you go to that do have smoking indoors. For the most part, it's probably smaller, family-owned establishments. But, you'll probably find that even on the streets, there are probably a bit more smokers than you're used to here in the States. So for those of you that maybe have asthma or something like that, you'll take that into consideration. All of these countries also have a non-English speaking population. And while you will find, all of you are going to major cities, so you will find people who speak English, but definitely expect you'll definitely be working your language skills a bit more than you might if you were going to London. Even though there are people that speak other languages, you'll definitely find a lot more in these cities, in these countries. For those of you who have particular allergies, or anything that it is important to know when you're out and about, I definitely suggest either learning how to say it before you go or asking someone when you get there what's the correct way to say this, or to have it written down. Anyone who's studied abroad or gone to a country where English wasn't the first language for a lot of people is familiar with this, and it can be a struggle, but we don't want any sort of health concerns to happen. So definitely make sure that you know how to say what you definitely need to say in the other languages. Finally, there tends to be more of a laid-back culture. Even though you're going to major cities, this might not apply everywhere, but for the most part, and this could sort of tie into more relaxed meal times, and Europeans in general tend to take a decent amount of vacation, probably compared to what we're used to here in the States. So you might find just more of a sort of blase attitude to things. It doesn't mean that people don't care. People just tend to be a bit more relaxed overall.
So Sweden and Denmark lumped together since their cultures are very similar. I actually did my study abroad, and I did a traveling study abroad through Scandinavia, and it was really amazing, and I fell in love with those countries. But a couple of things about these places. First of all, the cuisine is more than IKEA meatballs. There's actually a lot of really interesting foods to try. I tried reindeer when I was in Sweden, which was really crazy and cool. And like little herring, all these really interesting Scandinavian dishes that you get to try. I found that I went in 2010 and everybody spoke English, including people who worked at like the 7-Eleven. They could have a conversation with you. So it was, it's funny, these places they have a long history of teaching English from like early on in their lives. But a lot of the universities, I found out this while I was studying abroad, a lot of the universities don't have textbooks like at a high level in different content areas in their native languages, in like Swedish or Danish. So they only get the English version of the textbooks. So when you're in college, you have to be highly literate to be able to take classes. So I think that's another reason why there's so many people who speak English in this part of the world. Another thing to think about is bikes. I tried biking in Denmark and almost got run over. People are serious bikers, and they commute by bike. Like, that's really so common. Like, see just like thousands of bikes parked at, bike stalls around the city in front of the train station. It's really fun to partake in it, but be prepared. People are really intense. Another thing to think about is the daylight. These countries are pretty far north, so in the summer, you'll get near 24-hour daylight, depending how far north you are. Copenhagen and Stockholm are in the southern parts of the country, so you'll always have some nighttime in the summer, but it's definitely a lot shorter than you're probably used to. So the first week you're gonna be, for me, my first day I couldn't sleep because I woke up at 2 a.m. and there was still a little bit of light in the sky, and I had to take a walk around town. Like, first of all, I was jet lagged from the flight, and then second of all, just the daylight changes was really surprising to me. And at winter time, it's dark most of the day, and so people get sometimes they experience depression in the winter. It's much more common for this part of the world to get like seasonal depression, it's called, I think. So in the winter, it's a big drastic change from summer to winter. Be prepared. Then the weather, right? It's cold. In the summer, it's like colder than London. It gets up to the 75, 80 in the summer maybe, but it can definitely snow a lot. It is like Canadian weather conditions. And then it's also just an expensive part of the world as well. Going out to eat is going to be pricey. You need to be able to make sure that you're into a budget. Be careful of that. It's true in London as well. It's just very expensive places to go. So a lot of students run out of money in the first week. They're like, they use all their money up for their month, so just very conscious of your budget.
Okay. So we had planned to do a slide on South Africa and New Zealand, and I guess we'll skip over it. I won't go in depth into it, but for the most part, for any students that are going to South Africa or New Zealand, that is in the Southern Hemisphere, we'll have opposite seats. when it's winter here, it's summer there, and it's just a different. So if you know anyone that's going to these countries, or if we had a latecomer who's going to one of these countries, definitely be prepared for that. There's also a lot of interaction with local and indigenous cultures. And for the most part, these landscapes tend to be a bit rural and sort of distinct. So even if you're looking at pictures of like the city line or just like the local area, it'll all sort of be concentrated in one area. And then the rest will probably be mountains and forests and things like that. So we're not going to go too much into that. Does anyone have any country-specific questions before we go into what to expect, or any questions in general? Yes, no, maybe so.
No.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to quickly go into what to expect.
Cool. So I'll just start with some academic differences. For a lot of places around the world, going to college is a very different experience than going to college in the U.S., where you may be more used to like a smaller class size. I can speak to like Queen Mary, is a big, really very big school, and it's common that you'll be in lecture halls with hundreds of students, 100, 200 students, and then have like a breakout session once a week with a smaller group. There are different expectations, I think, than most U.S. schools, where you're gonna be really expected. It's much more on you to do the work, where you won't have like participation grade, or you won't have as many small assignments that lead up to your final grade. It'll be much more like heavily placed onto your exam. So that exam will be like 90% of your final grade or 80% of your final grade. The expectation is that you are keeping up yourself, and you're not going to be sort of like monitored each step of the way, if that makes sense. So this is pretty common, not at all schools. I don't know all of the universities or programs that you guys are going on. This may be different, but I would say that like it's less hand-holding than U.S. schools do in general. And also like, in England, it's a 3-year program. So it's just very intense, very fast, much faster than U.S. programs are, and much more focused on academics. Again, so for London and for UK students, they don't have since the programs are 3 years long, they don't have as many like general education requirements. They'll just throw you in, and you have intense sort of like, if you're an economics major, you will just have economics classes for 3 years. Maybe like a couple opportunities to take something else, but it's much more focused on your major. You don't get as much of an opportunity to explore other areas.
Yeah, and that's pretty common, like you said, for most universities outside of the U.S. A lot of other countries have their K-12 system is very different, and so students will often start college already having a rough idea of what they want to take, and so when you're becoming friends with French students or Italian students or Danish students, you might be surprised. I know that you all probably have your majors declared and you already have it figured out, but compared to what we experience in the U.S., they're probably a lot more, they've probably already done a lot more than some of their U.S. counterparts have, and that includes like internships and work experience. It's a whole different ballgame.
And then it's funny, the final grades, a lot of UK schools, 70% is an A. And I thought that was really weird when I was reading that. Like, that can't be right. But because your final test is so heavily weighted, they give a little leeway in that. It's kind of crazy, but that's how they grade. Not every school does that way. Some are like 80% is an A. But
that 90 to 99 scale that you're used to is probably not going to be the scale that you'll be working with. So look into that before you go, or when you get there, sort of talk with your professors and make sure that you understand the expectations for your classes.
Yeah, doesn't mean it's easier. Actually, it's probably harder than you're used to.
Yeah, it'll be a lot harder probably to get an A. Next, I'll go on to culture shock. And this is something that I'm sure y'all have already sort of discussed amongst yourselves, but culture shock will happen regardless of how much information you've looked up. It'll happen regardless of how much you think you know, regardless of how fluent you are maybe not fluent, but regardless of how much of the language that you've studied. There's always something and it can be something really small. You might find you really miss the food. You might find that you have a hard time connecting with locals. You might misunderstand like bus routes, and there's always going to be something really small that's just incredibly frustrating, and it will get to you. The culture shock happens in phases. So there's always, it's sort of like everything goes really great. It's the honeymoon phase. And then slowly but surely you get really frustrated by something. And that's very normal. It's normal to miss your families. It's normal to really miss like Burger King or like really random stuff that like you never really liked in the States, but like you don't have overseas. And so you just really want it for no real reason. And during those times, you'll definitely want to, for those of you that are going on programs with each other, keep in touch with each other. You'll also want to, most major cities have some sort of network for expats, for expatriates that have moved there. I'll also say that as a Black woman, there are a lot of resources for you available and a lot of blogging spaces, which I'll touch on later. But and something else I'd like to mention is that the culture shock that you may experience, I felt like overseas that it was a little bit twofold, and it was hard to know exactly if I was dealing with something, or if I felt like I was having a hard time due to being American, or if I felt like I was having a hard time being a Black woman. So that might be something that you might experience, and you might not. I mean, I would say that everyone has some form of culture shock, but some people have more than others. And the best thing that you can do is sort of, if you find yourself really frustrated, if you're having a hard time, Skype your parents, call your siblings, I called my grandma frequently while I was overseas because I just really missed talking to my grandma and having her sort of reassure me that everything was going to be okay. More than likely there'll be some sort of place where Americans gather. Maybe it's a bar or restaurant where you just have a bookstore, maybe. It's a normal feeling, and so we definitely want to encourage you to not feel like like a failure or like you're doing something wrong if you're having a rough time. You're only going for 4 months, but believe me, that a lot can happen while you're overseas. Within the first few days, for some of you within the first few hours, you'll very quickly realize that you're in a different place and that you have to sort of adjust differently. Next, I'll sort of touch on health and safety. As Drew mentioned, and in fact, all of the countries that you're going to do have different legal drinking ages. And so with that, we just want to remind you to move slowly. For those of you that would like to partake in some drinking while you're overseas, you'll definitely want to notice how locals do it and sort of move slowly until you know your surroundings and know what kind of establishments you're at. We also advise traveling in groups, regardless of what you're doing, especially when you first arrive, just to get a feel for things. And we'll give you some rough information on what to do with like cell phones and Wi-Fi and things like that, but it's always better to be with 2 or 3 other people instead of just one until you exactly know where you're going. And obviously you'll want to, for those of you that are traveling in countries where English might not be the language that's spoken by a lot of people, again, definitely in that case, I would definitely make sure that you want to, become friends with local students, make sure that you're just getting like the vibe of everywhere, and just keeping an eye out for things. Most of these countries that you're going to have, they have crime, maybe not the exact kind of crime that we're used to here in the States, maybe a lot more petty crime, pickpocketing, things like that, bikes getting stolen, which is something that happened when I was overseas. So like all of that like small random stuff, that's probably not a big deal here, would probably make a big, dent in your day. So just make sure that you're doing what you can, to be safe and to be aware of everything. Any questions about what to expect before we move on? Do any of you have sort of expectations already of what might happen when you're there? Have you already started looking into, resources for yourself, or what sort of culture you're getting involved in, or student clubs, or anything like that?
Not really.
No. Y'all haven't done anything? You haven't prepped a single bit for your study abroad experiences?
Yeah. I mean, we've been enrolled in like STS courses in which like we'll like learn like what other countries may perceive of Americans, or like how other countries may think, okay, since we're Black, we may not be Americans, and how not to take that as offense. So I feel like Spelman has started to prepare us on, what to expect and what not to expect in different countries.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's great. When I studied abroad, I was given very little information. I studied abroad for the first time in Asia, and it was a shock. It was a shock. So I definitely think that it's good that you have, that you've been prepared. Now, I'll say for myself, traveling, that's what it's hard to figure out, um, you know, what people sort of perceive you as. I got a lot of people that assume that I wasn't American, as well. And it's not necessarily something that I was insulted by, but it was kind of, you'll find, this might happen to you overseas. For those of you that your family has been in the United States for generations upon generations, like mine has, we don't even know, how long our family has been in the country. Explaining why can be difficult. Obviously, not at some countries do have a general overview of American history, but it's not always in depth. And so some of you might have a very interesting time, I think, trying to explain, if you choose to explain it, like why you are, like you might have to explain to people literally like why you're American. So it's like, oh no, you look like this, so you have to be from this country, and you're like, no, that's not how it works. Like I'm American, as for those of you who maybe have parents or grandparents who moved to the country, that might be something that they're more familiar with as a concept. But I found myself explaining myself a lot, and that's something that you can choose whether or not to indulge. But you'll get a lot of curious people for sure, that want to know those sorts of things. So, for our next slide. Okay. So next we're going to do quickly what to bring, what not to bring. And obviously this is different based on which countries you're going to, but this is just a general list. For clothing, you really want to dress in layers. Those of you who are going to Sweden and Denmark can maybe pack some heavier layers. You can expect that it'll be a little bit cooler there. But we find that, maybe one day it'll be kind of sunny, and one day it'll be kind of rainy, one day it'll be colder. And for the sake of packing, you definitely want to make sure that you're, bringing stuff that can be layered on top of each other. So maybe you want to bring a windbreaker and a light sweater and a tank top and a long sleeve shirt and, different thickness of socks or whatever you're comfortable with. But just keep that in mind. I always, for myself as a personal travel tip when it comes to packing clothes, I always pack things that you're going to reuse. I'm an overpacker. I will bring 20 pairs of clothes for a 6-day trip. You don't need to do that. Definitely work on not doing that because it will take up space. And I can promise you that you will want to bring stuff back home. So leave space in your suitcase if you can when you're going over to, especially if you are all going to great cities that have Europe and the UK tend to have fantastic clothing stores. And so for those of you that are really into shopping and into clothes and shoes and all of that, you're going to great places for it. And so you'll definitely want to leave room for that, and expect that you might buy some new clothes there that you can't buy here in the States. Next, for hair products. So I don't know if you can tell in the video, but I do have locks. And so for me, I brought all of my products with me, and for my friends who either were natural as well, or kept their hair braided or permed or whatever, I will say that you'll probably have more difficulty finding hair products. If there is any like Shea Moisture or whatever you use on your hair, or even just like Garnier Fructis or something, if you can find it, it's probably expensive. So I would suggest bringing enough to get yourself through as many times as you think you'll be taking advantage of that. But also a lot of local stores probably have something similar. It just might not be the same exact thing. So like hair gel and stuff, like it's not going to be Eco Styler gel or whatever you're using, but I guarantee you can find gel in Europe, hair gel in Europe. So it just might not be in the same section, or you might need to take a friend, someone who's fluent. For those of you going to places where English isn't the first language, you'll probably want to go, have someone with you to sort of explain it. For those of you going to the UK and London is so diverse. I think that you would be fine finding stuff, but again, it's probably more expensive, especially if they're importing it from the States. If you can, either bring what you can, have someone send it to you, or just see what the locals are using. There are a lot of stores, and I know London specifically, that are similar, to Walgreens, something that's maybe similar to like a Target, but not exactly. So none of you are going to very, very remote locations where you won't have access to some sort of store that can help you out. Any questions about that? Hair products, clothes? Nope. Nope. Yes. No. Okay. That's pretty good.
So for housing, just make sure that you know what you need to bring as far as bedding. That's a big thing. Some schools may provide bedding, some might not. I would check in with your program manager to find out if it's provided at your institution. And then something that we tell students, like if they don't provide sheets, do not buy a fitted sheet from the U.S. and try to bring it to the UK or to Europe, because sizing of beds are different, and it might turn out that your sheet is too small for your bed and you have to buy a new one anyway. Yeah, so I know our programs in London take students to a store nearby to get those fitted sheets if they need it. And sometimes they don't have duvets, usually there are pillows, but just something to think about, just making sure that you are aware of those sorts of things that you might need to bring with you or purchase there. Then cell phones. A lot of students are concerned about this. It's a big concern for sure. Most students either do one of two things. They either bring a phone that's unlocked that you can use a SIM card, and then purchase a SIM card overseas that will work in country. That's usually like a pay-as-you-go kind of situation. Or you get like a burner phone, like one of those cheap disposable phones that that you can use and then like you don't spend a ton of money on, but you can get use out of it while you're abroad. Then accessing money. So you obviously want to let your bank know that you're going abroad. Some banks might have agreements with European banks. So I think it may have been Bank of America that has an agreement with one of the big British banks. But you'd have to just kind of look into it and talk to your bank to see if there's any partnership like that. If there's any way you can save on like taking out money when you're abroad, because for me, when I was in Scandinavia, I paid like $5 every time I withdrew money from an ATM. And any purchase I made on my card, there was like a $3 fee.
So
yeah.
So would you recommend, like, every time going to the ATM, just taking out cash instead of just using your card in Europe?
Yeah, I think it's up to you. That's what I did, but it might be in your interest. I know there's some like credit cards that don't have overseas fees. That's something definitely look into if you're gonna be like it just will make life easier. What I did was I took out maybe like $200 at a time, like in the local currency, and so that I didn't like lose all my money if that was stolen, but it was still enough to get me by for a little bit. That is an option, but it's really up to you. And I would definitely look into that banking card or the credit cards that don't have overseas fees, because that might actually save you a lot of time and money.
And something to add on to that, before you go overseas, you should let your bank know, so that they don't think someone's stolen your identity and has gone to London. So you can, I don't know, banks have various time periods. When I went overseas, I called my bank right before I got on my plane. So like it's up to you how quick. I suggest doing it before that, just like in case you don't get anyone on the phone. It's a very big gamble. Yeah, and I know that now with like chip technology and things like that, that the chances of that sort of thing happening might be slimmer. But you'll definitely want to notify your bank. You may even want to, for those of you that have your individual bank accounts, you may want to look into like having your parents like giving them permission to do things with your bank account, or like power of attorney over like certain documents and things like that. And as a random travel tip, my mom always makes me do this when I travel. To this day, she makes me send her a picture of my passport while I'm overseas. So definitely consider that. It's a form of identification, and it's nice to have someone have a copy just in case, for whatever reason. It might be just a silly precaution that my mom made up, but I do know other people that do it. So just keep that in mind about your documents and that sort of stuff while you're going overseas as well.
And one last thing about currency and money. We advise students to bring about $100 worth of local currency with you when you're traveling. So in case your card doesn't work when you get there, at least you have something to help you get by until you can contact your bank and get that worked out. So most of your countries are using, right, the pound or the euro. Scandinavia uses a different currency, so make sure you know which currency your country uses. Get a small amount of money that will get you by like for a day or two until you can figure it out, just in case. And then last thing is Wi-Fi. So you might be used to high-speed Wi-Fi at wherever you're living, but some of the locations you're going to might not have as reliable of Wi-Fi, so just be prepared for that. Some dorms, you might need to go to like the main room on the first floor to get Wi-Fi. It all depends on where you're going. This is another question for your program-specific staff. But you shouldn't be like Netflix binging on your trip anyway, right? Like you should be able to have that time to enjoy and meet people and enjoy your time abroad.
I have a question, Ben. Okay, so about the housing. Okay, for me, my housing is homestay. Do you think I'll have to bring bed lining or like anything else for homestay?
Probably not, but it depends on your program. That's a good question for your program staff that you're working with.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. For the programs that we advise on, we don't have homestays. So I'm not exactly sure how it would work in your situation. Sorry about that.
Does anyone else have questions that they want to address before we go into additional resources? Okay.
Okay. All right. So we wanted to include a couple of resources that you might want to just look into before you go abroad. Diversity Abroad is an organization that supports different study abroad groups and supports diversity overseas. And so they have country guides, it's really pretty interesting stuff. They link to articles about experience in different countries that might be really interesting to get other people's perspectives when they were abroad and to see what they say about the country that you're visiting. Secondly, there are travel sections for the Department of State and the CIA. These are kind of more technical. The Department of State, generally, they'll do announcements if there's any kind of if there's an alert in a certain country, they'll send you an email and let you know about it. You should definitely sign up on their website when you go abroad so that if there's anything that happens in the country, you'll get an alert and so basically our government can keep track of you and make sure that you're safe. The CIA has more of a technical country resources. So they'll talk about the population and more statistical things. It's called, actually this is not right, it's Pathways to Safety. It is it's kind of like an emergency SOS kind of organization. They function all over the world and they're basically a way for you to get emergency help if you need it. SASHA is the acronym. I can't remember what it stands for. Sorry. But things to think about.
And then I just listed a few blogs that are helpful in the age of technology and the speed in which we can connect with each other. There's just so many different things that you can use to get in touch with others that have been in this situation. And there were a few blogs that, and so most of the blogs that I've listed have no specific destinations in mind, but all of these blogs have tons of people, resources for individual countries. And in fact, Rachel Travels and Onika the Traveler, those are two Black women, and they post, traveling is a job. And Onika the Traveler actually has her own show. And so you'll definitely, if you can find that online, just Google her and she'll come up, and so will her show. And so I'm sure she's traveled to way more countries than all of us are probably going to combine. Black Travel Movement and Black and Abroad are things that you can either find, I think on Facebook, and they also have blogs online. So there's a blog abroad. Some of these also have Instagram accounts. And I can't even tell you the amount of people that have been in your shoes. Obviously, Spain, France, and London are huge travel destinations. So for those of you that want something specific, either traveling as a woman or traveling as a Black woman, or just some of these resources also might be useful for anyone who identifies as LGBTQ or that maybe has disabilities or anything like that. There's definitely tons of people talking about their own experiences, and also, obviously your experience wouldn't be the same as theirs, but there might be some similarities that you might find useful. And then,
That's it.
yeah. Are there any questions or anything that we can, any last minute things that anyone wants to discuss or ask? No, you guys are quiet. What's going on? So when do you all, are you all leaving in like September or August?
Summer, fall.
Okay. Yeah, so you guys are, that's pretty quick. Okay, there's a variety. Okay. Okay, yeah, then we hope this was useful for you. We have our email, we added something in because it's not showing up clearly. But Karen has our email addresses. So definitely feel free if you want to talk with us individually or just check in about anything. For those of you that are going on programs that have Drew as your program manager, you'll obviously be keeping in touch with him right before you go. And thank you for having us. We hope that you enjoy your studying abroad and living abroad and experiencing something new. And we hope to hear from you guys later. Like, I hope that you guys start your own blogs and, track everything that you're doing so that we can be in the know and live through you. That's what I want to do. So.
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Yeah, like, give me like 5 minutes. Everyone in the room authorization.
That online link?